This is Andrew Whitstead, and you are listening to Heavy Board, and we're recording this on July 8th, 2025. My guest today is Thomas Cullen. Thomas is a federal trial judge and former U.S. attorney in Virginia. After graduating at the top of his class at William and Mary Law School, Thomas was recently honored as its 2024 Carter O. Lawrence Fellow. He's an accomplished athlete, running track throughout college. And on top of all that, listeners, Thomas is also a writer. His debut novel, Charlie Man, comes out this month on July 15th from Brandy Lane Publishing. Charlie Man follows a young boy in a classic coming of age style story as he navigates becoming a man at an elite boys' prep school. Cullen has written many op-eds and columns throughout his career, published nationally and locally. He's been awarded an honorary doctorate from his alma mater, Furman University in South Carolina. And as many will surely scurry to find out, yes, dear listeners, Thomas Cullen has presided over some very big and very consequential cases already in his career as a judge, which is still just beginning. But it's important to point out his appointment was praised with overwhelming bipartisan support, a very rare occurrence in today's political world. And it's a pleasure to welcome him onto Heavy Board today. Thomas Cullen, thanks for coming on Heavy Board.
Thanks for having me, Andrew. It's my pleasure.
Of course. The all artists and writers that come on the show get this kind of early childhood question. So we always start this off with, what was your childhood like? Where did you grow up? What did your parents do? We're very interested in how these early years started to form Thomas.
Sure. So I was born and raised in Richmond, Virginia, and spent my formative years there. That happens to be the setting of the novel that we'll talk about a little later in the show. Richmond, Virginia is like a lot of smaller southern towns. It is a historic place. It was the capital of the Confederacy during the Civil War. There are many vestiges of that era still in Richmond, although some of that is no longer a part of Richmond lore over recent years. All told, I had a great childhood in Richmond. I had wonderful parents. My father is a lawyer who still practices law. My mother was a teacher who then became a full-time mom. I'm one of four children, the oldest of four. I attended relatively large private school in Richmond, kind of similar to the school in my book, and spent a lot of time as a child playing sports, being outside. As a child in the 1980s and a teenager in the 1990s, I was fortunate enough not to have a cell phone. Didn't know what social media was. Used landline telephones, listened to CDs, and made mixtapes.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So you're the oldest of four children. So you're the oldest that gets all the responsibilities on you, right? Like
That's right.
even
A
now.
lot
Yeah.
comes with it.
It kind of never goes away too. It's always interesting, like the family dynamics. So whenever you get back together with the family, and it's like, oh, you're still the oldest, or you're still the youngest, and you get kind of told what to
That
do,
never
or
changes.
exactly, yes, exactly, exactly. So that's great. And I have a few questions about the private schools. I went to, yeah, like a college prep school in Baltimore. I've said Richmond's a little bit further away. I know some of the stuff like Northern Virginia and DC and stuff, where like St. John's, Gonzaga, like we would play them in football and stuff. I went to a school. It's called Calvert Hall there in
Yeah.
Baltimore. Yeah, it's might be local enough that you've heard of it. Yeah, so
Yeah.
it's yeah, we would travel around, but yeah, Richmond's great. I've only ever been to Richmond a few times. I have a baby boomer dad, and he's very into Civil War, World War II. So we would do these Civil War vacations where we would drive around, growing up in Maryland to all these Civil War locations. So yeah, I've seen the Confederate White House that's still,
Still
they're
downtown.
very
Yep.
very interesting. Yeah, very, very great stuff. A lot of historic stuff. So very, very great place to grow up. The next question we always like to ask is, when did reading and writing come into your life? Is that something you always did? Is it something you came to later in life? Like, were you always a big reader? When did that come into your life, reading and writing?
So I'm an avid reader, and I have been for a long time. I was fortunate enough to have a mother who read to me out loud from a young age, and to my siblings, and I still remember those evenings very fondly. Um, I became more avid as I got older. Like a lot of kids, probably between the ages of 8 and 15, I fought back and very reluctantly and begrudgingly did my summer reading. But by my late teenage years, I was very invested in reading and had and still have an eclectic taste in the types of books that I like. In terms of writing, I tell people I'm a lawyer now, judge. My first love has always been writing. And I had some wonderful teachers along the way in school. I remember fondly Weldon Bradshaw, my seventh grade English teacher, and learning the basics of grammar, punctuation style, and usage. And back in those days, we still diagrammed sentences. But
Right.
that was invaluable. Right, just to learn the basic nuts and bolts. And throughout my career as a practicing lawyer, I had the opportunity to write op-eds and essays on various topics, mainly related to law and current events, and occasionally political things. When you become a judge, you can no longer opine on those sorts of things. So I had to pivot, and more recently, I've written more general public interest pieces on fly fishing, which is one of my passions, an all boys summer camp that I attended, that my son now attends, and most recently, Charlie Man, which is my young adult novel.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. You know, it's very interesting here, Thomas. You'd be shocked at how many writers we've had on here that had a teacher for a parent, that had a school teacher for one of their parents or both, that just emphasized reading, writing, learn these books, the classic books or fun books, whatever they were, children's books, and it's just that it pays dividends down the road. It really does. Yeah, it's incredible to see. The follow-up to that is always, okay, what were some of the, go-to inspirations? What are your go-to writers, idols in the literary world? And anything goes, I know, you don't have to worry about, oh, it has to be Hemingway, anything
Sure.
goes. Yeah, yeah, whatever
Yeah.
your
Well,
your
Hemingway's
favorites
easy.
are.
I loved
Yeah.
Hemingway.
Yeah.
No, I remember The Sun Also Rises was one of
Right.
my favorite novels. Before I went to law school, I spent a year teaching high school English for 1 year at a boarding school. And that was one of the books that I ended up teaching that year, along with The Catcher in the Rye. So another one of my all-time favorites. I think my favorite novel of all time is All the King's Men by Robert Penn Warren, for different reasons. The setting, the time and place, New Orleans and Louisiana during the Depression, 1930s, the political theme, the wonderful and rich characters, and just the prose itself. I mean, there are portions of that book that are almost poetic. I think it's the greatest American novel, and it's my all-time favorite.
That's fantastic. It's interesting. It's funny how many lawyers turned fiction writers there are. Like they're really, I mean, everybody, Grisham and these kind of guys that,
Sure.
yeah, yeah, became, were trial lawyers or whatever, and then just started writing fiction in their spare time and took off. And yeah, it's interesting how that overlap. And we're going to get to that. I want to ask some questions about, yeah, legal writing is different than creative writing, but there's always overlap, and we're always interested in,
Sure.
writers how they handle that and all that. But I love those answers. Yeah. Uh, Another question I like to ask people that come on here that have prominent careers, even, why law? Why become a lawyer and then a judge? Was your goal always to be a judge? Or, what attracted you to that profession to pursue law as your career? Was that something you always wanted, or was it just something you fell in? What was it? It's family business. You said your dad was a
Sure.
lawyer. Yeah, what
Yeah,
was
to
it?
a certain extent, it's a family business. My grandfather was a lawyer. My father was a lawyer. I had uncles who were lawyers. So, in the
Yeah,
back of my mind, I always uh, harbor the ambition, perhaps I'll follow in their footsteps and be a successful lawyer. I'll tell you a funny story. I got into law school, and after I graduated from college, and I ended up going to William and Mary right after graduating, and I was sitting in day two of orientation, and I just had this realization that I wasn't cut out to be here. All these people were speaking up, raising their hands. They sounded very confident, and I just felt out of my depth and was greatly concerned that I wasn't going to do very well. So I ended up going to see the dean that afternoon and essentially said, "I think I've made a mistake. I don't think I should be here. I might go try to teach school for a year and figure things out. And I will be eternally grateful for then Dean Taylor Reevely, who ended up being the president of the College of William and Mary. He said, I understand. How about we do this? I'll save your spot for a year and you go off and teach. And if you want to come back, you can come back." And thankfully, he did. I went off and spent a year teaching and coaching soccer and track. But about halfway through the year, I soon realized that I did, in fact, want to go to law school and pursue that as a career. So I returned the following year and successfully completed law school and became a lawyer. Um, yeah, I think another part of the answer is I don't have a mathematical brain. I was never going to be an engineer. I certainly wasn't going to be a doctor. I was always pretty good at writing and comfortable speaking and just being around a lot of lawyers growing up just came to the natural realization that it would probably be a good fit for me.
Yeah. That's always it. I when I got into grad school, I remember my father kind of took me aside and just he told me this story. My father was a surgeon for 35 years in Baltimore there. He's retired now, but he told me this story of when he got into med school at the orientation, where, yeah, a couple hundred people sitting in this room, all excited to go to med school. He said, and the dean gets up there and gives this talk, and he just said, I know a lot of you guys are used to getting A's. All of you were the top of your class, all of that. He's like, I'm going to tell you right now, not everybody's getting A's. Okay. And so he just gave me that kind of talk. Is like, you're putting yourself into a higher and higher tier. And as you go up, you're not the best anymore. Everybody in this tier was the best in their class, going into like this next level of learning and all that education. Yeah. So it's always interesting how that works out.
It's so true.
Yeah, yeah, very, very important. I want to get to all of this kind of. Uh, so now that you're a judge, and again, like getting appointed to being a judge, I wanted to ask. We often get philosophical on this podcast, and I've been thinking about this. I was thinking about this with another episode where it came up something about being a judge, and I've had judges in the family and all of that. But I wanted to ask you, what would you say is your philosophy as a judge? And we don't need like definitive answers or anything, but how do you see that kind of role in kind of, it's an important position, a prestigious position in our culture. Is there any kind of reverence, like an emphasis on kind of carefully nuanced judgment? I mean, yeah, how do you view the kind of philosophy as a judge, like in our,
Sure.
yeah, I know that's a big question. Please feel free
Yeah.
to answer however you want.
So I think the
Yeah.
best way to answer it as a federal district judge, my number one obligation and priority is to faithfully apply the law as it exists, to listen to the arguments that are presented, to read the briefs, to understand um, the issues, and then to apply existing law to reach the right outcome. And in doing that, I think it's important that you create an environment where the litigants have a full and fair opportunity to argue their cases. And it's somewhere that they can do that safely and they feel respected and ultimately heard, regardless of whether or not the outcome goes their way. At the end of the process, that they feel like I've given them a fair shake. Um, we're not, as federal trial judges, typically making law. These
Right.
issues, most of the time, are not novel, right? Other courts have dealt with them, and the beauty of our common law system is we look to prior precedent to find an analog and figure out, okay, these facts may be slightly different, but this rule is longstanding. And because of that rule, the case needs to be decided this way, regardless of what my personal views are
Right.
or inclinations or biases.
Yeah, that's interesting. And the reason I ask it too is I've been thinking about it more. It was like, yeah, that's there's a lot of cynicism when people think of that. They're like, oh, a judge or whatever. Oh, they think of corrupt judges, or they think of, who is this person to lay down the law on me or something. But I think that there is such an important role, in the justice system, in the way we've set everything up. Like, having a good judge or a bad judge can mean the difference in so many different cases. And then, like you said, everybody confuses it too. They confuse the Supreme Court stuff where it's more philosophical kind of stuff than with trial judges that are just, yeah, looking at the laws that exist, that people confuse it all together. So yeah, I was just curious about, yeah, how does a judge think of something like that? Like, the importance of it, the role that it plays in our culture and society, not just enforcing the law, but I think, yeah, like when is, making the judgment in terms of this is, you deserve a slap on the wrist or you deserve the maximum, like how do you weigh that? Is it every case is different, obviously, but
Every case is
yeah,
different. And my docket, we have civil cases, lawsuits, and then we have the criminal docket where you have individual defendants who are charged with violating federal law. Most of those defendants end up pleading guilty. Many are convicted after trial. And one of the most difficult aspects of this job is, as a federal district judge, I have to make the decision with respect to the appropriate sentence. That's probably the hardest part of my job. There are a number of considerations at play, right? So I have to make sure that the sentence imposed constitutes just punishment
right,
given the type of crime and the harm to society, to particular victims. I need to make sure that the sentence deters additional further criminal conduct, that it promotes respect for the law. But I also have to take into account the individual defendant, his or her
right,
history and characteristics, their background, substance abuse issues that don't
right,
excuse what they did, but they may help explain it and put it in
right.
appropriate context. So I spend an inordinate amount of time as I prepare for those sentencings to try to understand what happened, what is the crime at issue, and who is this person, and what have they encountered along the way.
Yeah, very interesting. Yeah, yeah. And I mean, people forget about this, and especially the way social media works, and everybody has a take on whatever, however a trial went or however a trial happened, especially if it's a big case covered in the media or something. And it is like I think people just tend to forget that, like, these are people sitting here trying to do their best to consider everything. And also, like, yeah, the age of the defendant, that matters. Okay, like it does. And it depends on the history too with the age. All of this stuff has to be weighed, and you do the best you can. So I mean, yeah, but I'm just fascinated by that too because I think it is such an important kind of role. I don't know. I mean, I've had judges in the family and things like that. I was thinking about this in another episode, but Judge Whitstadt was a great uncle of mine who I met, maybe twice in my life, but his name in where I grew up in Baltimore was highly respected because of his judgments, because he would do the right thing. He would, and I was just so fascinated about how that reputation of this guy who I barely met trickled down to me just because I shared the last name with him or whatever. And I was like, yeah, like that's such an important role in our culture here. So I was just, well, I had a federal judge on the podcast. I wanted to ask about it a little bit, how you
Of
thought of
course.
that. Yeah. And this brings me to my next question here. You have this great career, successful career as a judge, a lawyer. Why fiction, let alone young adult fiction? I always joke on the podcast, fiction writing is one of the worst businesses on the planet right now. Why write fiction? Why get into fiction after all this?
So I needed an outlet, right? I couldn't write the types of pieces that I had historically written as a practicing lawyer, and I think that the easiest answer is I had the makings of a story in my mind, something that had been percolating for a long time. I'd say for the last almost 10 years, I had the idea for the book. I probably had most of the first chapter written. I knew it would be based in Richmond at a unique time, the early to mid 1990s, probably set at some fictional boys' school. And many of the characters would be vaguely familiar to me as a young man, either because they're composites of folks that I knew, or I don't think there are any dead ringers, but folks who bear some key similarities with some friends and teachers, coaches, and other folks that I encountered along the way.
Yeah, yeah, that's always interesting too. It's fiction seems to be more and more. We ask this question because we do, it's one of those things where you have to have a day job now. You're not making a living off it. Even the big, I mean, okay, so the big ones that were grandfathered in pre the internet, where it's kind of destroying the industry here,
Sure.
they're fine. But yeah, it is kind of a labor of love now. So it's always interesting. Yeah, you find all these people that have all these different careers, all these different trajectories, and they're still kind of drawn to this. So we just like to ask about it on this podcast with especially a coming of age story, like what inspired this coming of age story? Like especially a young adult fiction thing, was it just the right venue for this story? It just came to you that way. Would you always have this kind of idea for a coming of age story?
So I wanted to write a young adult novel because I'd had these experiences growing up in this unique place during this unique time, the early to mid 1990s, Richmond, Virginia. And I knew, having read pretty widely, that there wasn't a lot out there, right,
Right.
about being a teenager at that particular time, pre internet, social media in the South. Um, that was appealing to me. It was space that I'd have to myself, and I just looked forward to the challenge of trying this particular genre that was different from the type of writing that I do every day. I mean, as a lawyer, now as a judge, I write all the time, and I have for the my entire career, but it's different. Um, as a judge and as a lawyer, I always tried to stay away from legalese. Lawyers sometimes get bad raps for trying to overwrite, right? Using flowery, sophisticated language, terms that non-lawyers don't understand. And I've always prided myself on writing in such a way that the non-lawyer can pick up the work product and quickly grasp what the issues
Right.
are, and what's at play, and follow along. In other words, when I write as a lawyer, what I tell my law clerks is I want the reader to feel like they're picking up the local newspaper, right, and reading about something that happened yesterday. Um, so I had that kind of as a basis for how I approach the book. But things like writing dialogue and character development, those were new animals for me.
Right.
And going into it, I was worried, can you do those critical aspects of writing fiction? And as I got into it, I found that, you know what, I think I can, and it's a heck of a lot of fun to do.
Yeah. That's something I noticed, yeah, in that interview I read on you from the Cardinal, the local paper there as I was researching this. Yeah, you mentioned that kind of wanting your legal opinions and all of that, your case writings to be legible to the average person. And I always a good example of this, listeners out there that don't know what we're saying, is if you look at like the ballot initiatives on your local ballot, whenever it comes out and they describe whatever the proposition is that they're voting you on, like I have master's degrees in literature, so I can understand it, but it takes me a while, to like go through and be like, yeah, the legal terms, the vocabulary, it's kind of like a gatekeeping or like to keep you out of this or something. You have to have a law degree to understand some of it, or yeah, a degree in writing or something to know what they're
Right.
doing here with the clauses all jumbled together and on and on and on. And that's good because then what inspired you to do that? Like why do you view that as so important? Because I think that's a distinction between you and I think a lot of other lawyers that maybe don't even consider something like that. But I think, was it something you considered more as a judge where like, people need to know what I'm doing. I have a responsibility. I mean, yeah, what motivated that? Yeah.
So I think it's a combination of a couple of things. One is having good teachers and mentors along the way. At the beginning of my career as a lawyer, I had the privilege of clerking for a federal district judge in Richmond who was a beautiful writer. Right. And he taught me, among other things, that the editing most of the time is more important than the writing. So
Right.
you write it and then you edit it, and then you rewrite it and you edit again, and you're constantly looking to achieve clarity and to make it more concise, using fewer words, declarative sentences, and the like. So that was an integral part of becoming a good writer. There's a legal writing guru named Brian Gardner, who does a bunch of seminars, and he's published a bunch of books on legal writing. And I'm a avid fan of his. I own several of his books. I've participated in his seminars. So that was kind of a key influence on me. And his, the main takeaway when you get in Brian Gardner world is you're looking for clarity
Right.
and conciseness and avoiding legalese, making your writing accessible to the average reader. Ultimately, the writing is going to be more effective and more powerful if you keep those goals in mind.
Yeah, and easier for people to, we don't think about this, but 100 years from now, going back to read or something like a
Absolutely.
decision. Yeah, it's there for not just the current population, but for the population that's going to go and review this case maybe in 100 years from now, need the precedent or something. Yeah, I love that you put that emphasis in there because it is so important to be like, this isn't just for lawyers. This isn't just for judges and clerks. This is for everyone here. So I think that's just. I mean, I think, and not to say that, no judge does this. Of course, I'm sure plenty of judges care about this, but it's just, yeah, it's something you don't hear that often from somebody in that position. Like, um, and I do want to get into, okay, I asked about this, but I want to ask you about the prep school, your stuff. So you attended a prep school yourself. And the reason I asked this because I attended a prep school, and I think that this people that didn't attend these schools, um, don't quite understand what it actually is. So you said you drew a lot of inspiration for that. I wonder what does it mean to you when you kind of go into your prep school? That's always kind of good alumni associations and all of that. Like what did it mean to you to go to an all boys prep school like that?
So I actually, the school I attended, collegiate school in Richmond, is technically co-ed,
Oh,
but
okay, okay,
in middle school, it is we're single sex. So there's a boys' middle school and a girls' middle school. So during the those awkward years between fifth and eighth grade, when you're approximately 12 to 14 years old, you're among a lot of little boys, and it's I quipped before, similar to the experience in the novel Lord of the Flies,
right,
particularly at that period of time in our culture. Um, so there, the masculinity, fierce competition, deep friendships,
yes,
shared experiences, but set in a kind of a unique place where you're, for good or bad, you're growing up and living nearby, frequenting the same clubs and pools that your friends you go to school with are. You vacation in the same place.
right,
You're living in some would say a bubble, a very insular world.
yeah,
But the school itself at that time, and I think the school it's in the book, fictional St. Mark's, um, one of the goals of that is to kind of reinforce the values of the surrounding community, right?
right,
With respect to young boys, as I said, it's to be a man, to be a good athlete, to be competitive, to do well in school, to win over a girl, all the things for good or bad that at that time were highly valued within that particular society.
yeah, yeah. And the reason I ask this is because I think it is important distinction to be made between something like a private, and of course, people can kind of assume this already. If you didn't go to a private, kind of college prep school for that kind of thing, you can make assumptions, sure. But I always describe it when people ask me, like, "Oh, what was that like? No girls at the school, wasn't that boring?" Blah blah. And I was just like, the best way I can describe it is that it's this weird kind of military-esque camaraderie. It is and it grows as you leave the school more than when you're actually there, but you do feel it when you're there. everybody around you, all the adults, all the teachers, all the administrators are enforcing a certain norm. They're enforcing a standard of dress, a standard of behavior, a standard of kind of integrity. You know, the slogan at my school that I take seriously, that I mean, again, I'm almost 20 years removed from graduating from high school, and I still think about it. You know, the slogan at my school was men of faith, men of intellect, men of integrity, particularly the integrity part, where there is this kind of how are young men shown this? I think this gets to your novel too, this kind of becoming a man. What does it mean to become a man? A lot of young men don't know what to do or what that means. They need an older man to show them, an adult to kind of guide them through, to correct behavior. Don't do it that way. Do it this way. Don't speak like that. Speak like this. You know, look at somebody in the eye if you have something. You know, all these kind of little things that you don't think about that you kind of, you know, that's what you're paying for. Obviously, you're paying for the status, you're paying for the prestige, you're paying for the education and the chance to get into a good school for college, et cetera, et cetera. And of course, that's all a given. But I think it's more than that. You know, people choose to send their children to things like this because I think it is a formative, like you really are forming somebody to be in a culture and society, which, you know, of a current day, we'll just say America, right? But of course, there's regions and all that stuff and all that little details. But yeah, I don't know. I'm fascinated by that whenever I meet somebody that's from that kind of situation. There's an instantly, I feel like a connection where like we kind of experience similar things. You know, it wasn't so much the baby boomers where they had nuns slapping them on the wrists and thing, you know, knuckles and stuff where they would talk about, or the brothers and stuff, Christian brothers or priests, whoever taught at the school that they attended. But it still was this kind of not strict, but maybe stricter than you would at a public school or something like that. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I know I'm rambling. What do you think of that? I don't know.
No, no, I think that's very true. I think one of the reasons that parents in that era in Richmond sent their sons and daughters to schools like that is they want to instill and reinforce values that they and traditions, right? That they held dear in their own lives. And I think you're absolutely right. I mean, there's this kind of rigid code that is imposed from on high, but it's also enforced kind of within the ranks, right?
Right,
So we all know what the rules are. If someone steps out of line, it's handled,
right.
and it's expected to be handled. So, I mean, there's good and bad that comes with that. And fortunately, I think over the years, as we progress as a society, some of the bad stuff has fallen by the wayside. But it was still an important time, a formative time, and I think for many of us, we can attribute whatever success we've had in life to a lot of the things we experienced at that age and the lessons that we learned and the values that were instilled by those teachers and coaches and mentors.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just talking to a guest about that, about coaches. We kind of talked about the difference between what a father can do and what a father can't do. You know, your father can do so much, but then the kid's going to rebel and start to, you know, looking for other authority figures, adult figures, maybe a coach, maybe somebody else, or maybe an uncle or yeah, I don't know, anything, you know, a friend that would just help them maybe understand something that they're refusing to see through just the father or something. You know, there's like a built-in kind of resistance to whatever your father says, but
Right.
when another man, when all the adult men around you are saying the same thing, it's easier to fall into that. Yeah. But yeah, I was thinking, you know, when I was preparing for this, reading your book, is I was thinking, you know, I kept wanting to make comparisons to A Separate Piece, the kind of classic boarding school, you know, kind of male coming of age story. Remember, I had to read it in high school. They assigned it to us freshman year,
Right.
and there is that kind of maybe if you never experienced it, you really don't know what they're talking about with this kind of yeah. I don't know. There's something about it, and they make you because of the kind of how old the schools are and how long they've been around. They do make you feel like you're a part of something bigger than yourself. And yeah, when you're 14, you don't understand that, but as you get older and you're away from that, I think you do. You're looking back, you can kind of say, "Oh wow, you know, I still think about teachers that would correct my behavior or something, or tell me a story from that time still." Like, and I just think about, oh man, you know, I don't know. It just, and I was
So
thinking,
true.
what? Yeah,
You roll
please.
your eyes at the time, right? We're
Right. Yeah.
cynical teenagers, but you remember these folks for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
You truly do. And um,
If you're hearing this, it's because you are listening to the free public feed of Heavy Board. To get complete, uncensored, uninterrupted, full access to this podcast, become a subscriber at patreon.com/heavyboard. That's right, Heavy Board is made possible by subscribers like you. For less than 1 cup of coffee per month, you will receive private access to uncensored, full-length episodes, Jerk Shop, heavy bonus content, subscribers-only AMA episodes, bonus extended interviews, and more. Come join the conversation today at patreon.com/heavyboard.
And I think that's so important. I mean, I had the opportunity a couple of months ago to give the commencement baccalaureate at my alma mater high school, and I hadn't been back in a long time. And I took that as an opportunity, essentially to say thank you by name to all of these teachers and coaches who played such an important role in my life, and in so doing, to impart on the graduates. You have your own lists, right?
Right.
And you don't realize it now. But trust me, 35 years later, you will think of these folks often. So don't be like me. Before you walk off the stage tomorrow, pull them aside and say thank you,
Yeah.
because they don't hear it enough.
Yeah, and I know this is an extreme comparison too, but I kind of like, I think of that opening scene in Saving Private Ryan when the guy drops to his knees and is crying. They don't understand why he's crying. And I'm just saying, like, I'm thinking to myself, like, yeah, obviously that's not the same situation. We didn't go to war and die, but there is this kind of you prove that you've earned this. You've earned this privilege, this constant attention. Your parents paid a lot of money, sacrificed a lot of things. And as you get older, you kind of understand, oh yeah, you have to kind of prove that you've earned this privilege, this kind of uh uh and people would use the word elite. Fuck, let's use that word. Why not? Yeah, sure, it's elite. Yeah, well, it is. Okay, yes. Okay, not everybody gets to go to those schools, of course, but it's still like, yeah, there is an emphasis, especially on the young boys, where it says, no, you need to earn this. You didn't earn it yet. You were given it, but you will earn it eventually if you do what kind of thing. And now look at you, you're the judge, and you're giving back to the community in this way and taking it seriously. Like it's not just like, oh yeah, I'm a judge, I'm this powerful person. It's no, I have a responsibility and I take it very seriously. I mean, I think that's just missing. This gets me to your book, which, sorry, I know I'm going off and off, but men in fiction, the kind of men disappearing from fiction, young adult fiction or adult fiction. There's constantly articles. We see them all the time. Oh, where have all the male novels gone? Where have all the rock star male novelists gone? Where are all the boys that are reading, the Boxcar Kids? Or where are all these boys? Why are boys not reading? I don't know. Why did you think that a male-centric character needed to happen? And we're going to get into the publishing of that too. But yeah, just start with that. Like, why do you think that's happening? And why did you feel that you needed to write a book with this? Or was it just something that you didn't even think about that hard? I don't know. Again,
Yeah,
answer
so
that
I
however
think
you
when I
want.
started, the honest answer is I didn't think about it that much. As I got into it
Right.
and started the publishing process, and then most recently the articles in the New York Times that I've read about, what happened, as you just said, to
Yes.
the
I think
male
we read the
author
same
writing about
article. Yes.
young men. It's virtually non-existent. That started to make more sense to me. I don't know what the cause of that is. I think it's probably generally true that more women are avid readers than similar age men. That this, for whatever
Right.
reason, that's just reality. So I think the market reflects that in terms of a disproportionate share of female authors versus male authors, and then the books themselves, fewer male protagonists, fewer young men, particularly in the American South.
Right.
I think to a large extent, those types of characters have disappeared, but I do think there's a market that's still out there. I think, quite frankly, I think, as the article alluded to, a lot of potential readers or former readers are just turned off
Right.
by a lot of what's out there today. They feel like no one's really writing to me and my experiences and my interests, whether it's being in the outdoors, fishing, sports, just being a 18-year-old boy struggling through life, trying to rekindle a relationship with a girl, having a complex friendship with a best friend and the like. Those sorts of things are certainly pertinent to a lot of potential readers, and I think there's an opportunity to kind of fill that void.
Yeah. I notice especially, I mean, somebody that follows fiction and publishing and all of this, and I have degrees in this shit, it's I do notice that it's especially sex, if anything comes to kind of an adolescent boys kind of exploring sexuality, there's a big everybody kind of tightening up for a minute there. Especially,
Sure,
boys can do some pretty stupid things when they're when they're 14 and 15 with their friends or something, sure. So there is some hesitancy, but I think it is part of the reality as well, right? These young boys need to be learn about how to handle that, how to control it. This is expectations around it, uh, and sometimes fiction can do that. Sometimes reading a story of somebody in a similar situation, coming of age, can do that for you. And there's a plenty of emphasis on women, right? Where there's, oh, we need a woman protagonist, or we need a woman to, whatever, slay the dragon in the Dragon Slayer story. I'm using a archetype, but yeah, and we forget about so women are covered. They're covered. They got it. They got plenty of stuff that they can read that captures what they're going through and what it means to be a teenage girl and growing up. And boys, we did, and it's starting to fall off a little bit. Yeah, I think that's very true. We are. I don't know. Same thing. If you don't have any other guide, sometimes a character in a novel can show you something, or the revelation that they have in the story, you can kind of relate to your own life and then learn something from it. I think it is. I don't know, because I go back and forth on this about people want to pretend that literature is the most powerful thing in the world, and then they also want to pretend that it has no power to at the same time. And it's like, well, the answer is somewhere in between, right? Where it can change you as a person, open your eyes and stuff, but then it's also just, it could just be a fun, beach read or something too, where you don't think about too hard. It can be both of those things.
sure.
And I don't know. I think, yeah, that maybe men are looking for something. And I was just curious, yeah, if you had anything that you set out for that, or if it was just something that happened, you're like, oh, I'll just write this story, and then it came later when the publishing kind of pushed back from the public. Did you get any pushback from publishers or anything like that
So,
for it? Or?
that's a great question. With a non-traditional background, this was totally new to me from start to finish. So, as I started to write, once I had about a third of the manuscript completed, I started to think about, okay, so what are the next steps? I mean, how do I get this published? And I had a few contacts in and around the industry. I was getting conflicting advice. I think I sent a couple of queries to fiction agents, heard nothing, and then landed on Brandy Lane in Richmond, which is it's been around, I think, since like the early 1980s. Robert Pruitt is the publisher, and they have a longstanding track record of publishing really good children's books and young adult, and then kind of special interest Virginia-based theme novels and nonfiction. So I reached out directly to Robert. I think I was probably at that point halfway, three-quarters way through the manuscript, just saying, "Hey, here's my elevator pitch. I'm working on this. This is my background. Would you be interested?" And he responded, I think within a day or two, and said, I would be interested. Finish it and then send it to me, and then we'll see where we are, and go from there.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So you didn't get any kind of, yeah, I've heard mixed things. I've heard mixed things. We've had people that if you have, it depends how sexually charged maybe some of it is, or if it's just, yeah, if it's just the coming of age story or what, or it depends on the publisher too. It depends on the
Yeah,
publisher. If you go to the smaller press, you're not going to get as much pushback as if you're on the big five presses. It's just a weird thing that we like to ask about here. So I'm curious. I'm glad that you didn't have much,
yeah.
didn't
No, I
have to deal
didn't
with
have any
any of that.
pushback
Yeah, good, good,
from Robert. So
good. I wanted to ask about setting too. The 1990s. Why set the novel in the 1990s? It's happening a lot. Like people are setting things more in the 90s here. Why did you want to set it in the 90s? Why did you think that was right for the
right.
story?
So if I was going to write young adult, I don't understand kind of the young adult experience circa the 2000 and 2024, right? I do at a surface level. So I've learned and I've adapted, but being a teenager with the internet and social media, Snapchat and Instagram, downloading your music, all the things that they do now. And I have two children who are both teenagers. I mean, I understand and can observe, but I haven't lived it. So if I was going to write about it and have characters who are coming of age as 18-year-old boys, I had to write based on a familiar experience. So practically, that had to be when I was that age, right?
Right.
Drawing on what life was like for me at that point. And as I said earlier, that particular time is kind of seared in my brain, right? Because I was 18. I was growing up, so having these really cool, informative experiences that I recall fondly for the most part,
Right. Yeah.
and could draw on. And I just thought it would be fun to present these kind of timeless challenges and conflicts in that post or pre-modern era where we didn't constantly have to check our phones and our whole existence kind of revolved around our network that was phone based. And I wanted to provide a glimpse of what life was like. And we're still dealing with the same things, right? But they just looked a little bit different because our society and technology was different.
Yeah, it's a theme on this podcast. Yeah, how do you write about the tech? How do you write about today's run? You see, even the big authors, the big literary authors, I'm thinking Tessa Moshfegh, I'm thinking like these big figures, they're writing about the early 2000s. They're setting their books 20 years ago, before all this. And I'm thinking, is it because it's harder to capture all of the tech and all of the little nuances of it? Or is it just like it's not as interesting when you're just reading like, oh, I got an email and you have to read the email, in the fiction or whatever. It's a fictional email, and then you're going back and forth in emails or something or text messages.
Right.
It's just not as exciting as if it was an in-person conversation or if it was I don't know. Maybe, and I was thinking about this too. I wrote a movie review recently. It's up on my Substack. Listeners, go listen to it. But it kind of um, like social media doesn't quite translate to the arts just yet. Like it's a kind of a medium that is stuck in social media. I don't know. It doesn't translate to movies and TV like it did. Do I still have you, Thomas? Always a part of podcasting, but it looks like we did save everything previously. Yeah,
Oh,
sorry.
good. Okay.
I know it interrupts the flow to this. So I was what were we talking about? What were we talking about? Uh, all right. So I did want to ask you a little bit about kind of the difference between legal writing and fiction writing. Do you approach the two differently? Do you have different rituals, different spots? How do you separate the two, or do you separate the two, in terms of your
Um,
writing?
Sure. So, in terms of the discipline of writing, I tried to approach writing the book in a similar manner as I would approach a legal opinion that I had to knock out, which is to say that I made the decision early on, whether I was having a productive day or not, I needed to move the story along. So I had, whether it was 500 words or 1,000 words. I wanted to get something down every day, and as the novel and the manuscript progressed, the goals became a little more concrete and ambitious. So, I finished chapter 4 over the weekend. By the end of next week, I ought to be able to get 2 more chapters done. And I think having that kind of discipline and those sorts of concrete goals really helped me move the project along. And like a lot of writers, once you get into it, you develop your flow, and sometimes it was hard to put down Charlie Man and turn to more mundane topics that I do in my day job.
Yeah, it's always interesting too. I like to notice because, writing's one of those things. It's one of those things that requires people underestimate the time, the effort, the energy that it takes to produce something out of nothing. The story wasn't there. You sat down. Now there's part of it here. It takes a lot out of you. So yeah, to schedule that in with a busy day job, demanding day job, and you have to write for the day job too. We've had a lawyers on that yeah, like write novels and stuff, and we had one that said he had different desks for creative stuff versus legal stuff. Like he's like I can't even sit at the desk when I'm doing the legal stuff. I just can't be near it if I'm going to be doing the creative stuff. I
Yeah,
thought that
that's
was
interesting.
interesting. Yeah, I was like that's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So I'm the opposite. I have to, I have my setup for writing,
right.
whether it's fiction or work. And it's kind of the command center. It's where I'm most comfortable and no distractions. So I was able to utilize the same space.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I just we're always interested in things like that, these little details that make something, work for the writer or whatever you got to do to get
Right.
the story out. Yeah. Before we move on to kind of the last couple, we like to end this with all just kind of straight kind of craft questions. And again,
Sure.
this is a podcast where we're not looking for, definitive answers, just your thoughts on this. I wanted to ask you, because given Charlie Man, what it's about, this kind of coming of age novels, and we talked a little bit about masculinity and stuff. What does like kind of coming of age as a man look like now? Or, and then again, we don't need definitive answers, but what you would think, yeah, being a father, being a man yourself, kind of growing into yourself, all of the, I mean, what does it look like now? Or what would you
Sure.
say? Yeah.
So I think it's a few things. It's a recognition that life is difficult. And whether you're an 18, 17, 18-year-old boy or a 48-year-old judge, you're constantly facing challenges and setbacks, some more serious than others. And I think, I hope the book kind of reinforces the notion that you have to try to be resilient and pick yourself up and press on. And in doing that, you can't. You have to be willing, and I think this is more wisdom looking back on my childhood versus how I would have approached it at that time. But a willingness not to rely totally on yourself, right? To be willing to confide in friends, in parents, in teachers, in coaches, to share your struggles and ask for a helping hand when needed. I think um, one of the unique aspects of growing up at that time in that kind of culture, particular place, you internalize a lot of things and you dealt with things on your own. And I think one of the benefits of our more modern culture is we're a little more comfortable with the notion that you can express these thoughts and these feelings, and it's okay to be anxious or depressed, and to tell someone about that. So I think that's also a part of coming of age, not being totally reliant and being willing to be vulnerable and rely on other people.
Yeah, that's an interesting way to put it too, because I feel the reason I asked the question, not just because, it's in your book and all of that too, but that's part of it, but I feel like people talk about this all the time. It's subject of articles all the time in the New York Times and stuff like that. Masculinity crisis, toxic masculinity.
Toxic masculinity, right?
And my problem with it is it's always based around this version of masculinity from before I was born. The 1950s or something with men were, quiet stoic types that just slugged beers and swung a hammer or whatever and that was what it was. But I'm like, that hasn't been the case for like 70 years here. That's not how my father's generation viewed it as
Sure.
the baby boomers. That's not how, the Gen Xers viewed it. That's not how my generation viewed it. And so, like, we're almost talking about a phantom from like the past when people are saying toxic stuff. I get what they mean. We all know what they mean when they say toxic masculinity. So, yeah, I was just curious about it. Again, this is somewhat controversial and political that, I mean, just because of the world we live in now. I'm a fan of Jordan Peterson, the kind of controversial psychologist that's popular in the US and all over the world, really. And, his take on this would always say, responsibility is coming of age as a man, taking responsibility, not just for your own actions, but for others too, people underneath of you, all of that, and compassion, kind of, yeah, almost like a judge, right, considering what it is, what's the circumstance, what's this particular circumstance, and what's the punishment, or not even punishment, but yeah. the consequences of that or something. Yeah, I don't know, something like that. And I wonder too, because I think, your book's a great example of this, is that young men do, they need an example kind of thing. We're apes, right? Like we monkey see, monkey do. We need to see what somebody else does to know that that's how you do it, or that's how you become, your own man. I don't know, living, fulfilling your own life, taking care of. I don't know. I mean, there's all kinds of different ways people could emphasize that kind of, oh, this is what it means to be masculine or something. So I was just curious, yeah, about
Yeah,
your thoughts on it. Yeah. Just it's a theme on the podcast. It's a theme on the podcast, along with the publishing and how men feel like there aren't enough books for them or something like
right,
that, or enough characters. All I think it's all tied up in kind of the strange culture that we live in, which is tied up in social media and for some reason now politics has become a huge, and the judicial system is a huge topic of
right.
conversation, even by enthusiastic amateurs that don't know what they're talking about. So there's all that.
Yeah,
But
so
yeah,
I think part of the book is to present um, this notion of masculinity at that time in a non-threatening way.
right.
It's an important part of these boys' development and their identity, and channeled appropriately, it has many benefits, right? I don't think it's anything to be fearful of. And I think there's a lot of good that comes out of those experiences that young men have at that time in their lives. So we should, my view is, embrace it, and try to guide and direct, so we achieve the proper outcomes, that they're end up being virtuous and role models, and have wisdom that they impart to younger generations as they get older.
This is somewhat unrelated, but I was just thinking of it. Did you when you went to your prep school, did you have a lot of teachers that were alumni at the prep
Yes,
school?
we
Yeah.
we did. Yeah, so
Yeah.
that is pretty common at where I attended school, and in fact, many of my schoolmates and summer camp mates are now teachers and coaches at the
Right.
high school, and that's a neat thing,
Yeah.
and they're wonderful,
Right.
and I think they're good at what they do because they have that shared experience in
Yeah.
part.
It was, I think, probably at mine, the overwhelming majority of staff administrators were alumni. And in the yearbook every year, they would have their graduating class, like after their
Sure,
name. So, 67 or whatever, when they graduated. And yeah, I think there is something, I mean, that should tell people something about the kind of camaraderie, how you feel like you belong in this institution, in this organization, what you feel like you're doing there, improving the world, improving these people's lives, giving them opportunities. I think that's very, that's a big piece of evidence, I think, for the benefit of those types of schools. Like obviously not everybody can afford it, but still, it's worth it. Yeah, there's just something that it just again flared into my head here as we were going.
sure.
The last couple of questions here, Thomas, are all craft questions about writing, and these are details we like to know, as most of the people listening are writers or aspiring writers, fans of writing that like to know these things. We like to ask, what is your writing routine like? How do you like to do it? Are you a morning guy? Do you have elaborate rituals? How do you like to do your writing routine?
So, with respect to this book, I was a morning guy, right? Because I had a job I had
Right,
to attend to during most of the day. So I would try to get in early, write for a couple of hours, write on the weekends when I could, and had some time away from kids and family responsibilities. But as I said previously, I tried to be disciplined, right? Set a goal. You got to do something,
right,
right? Whether it's just one scene or a piece of dialogue. You
right.
want to at the end of the day say, okay, I did. I moved the story along to a certain extent today. So that was important to me, to bring the same type of discipline that I approach my work to the project of writing the novel.
Any elaborate rituals or anything, or just sit down when you're in the morning when you got the time and
Yeah,
crank
so
it out,
it
or
was really a kind of a seat of the pants flow kind of thing.
yeah,
As I got into it, I'm an avid runner, so some of my best ideas, whether it's law related or about the book, would come to me on trail runs near my house, and I would get home and scratch out, jot down notes, and sometimes little outlines for the next chapter as I went. But there was no rigid, formulaic outline as I set out to write the book. And and I think I've heard it said, and I think it's true. You just don't know where your characters are going to take you,
Right.
um, and it just comes to you along the way. If you're totally invested and you've built a good foundation and you have good characters, you end up getting to the right place at the end, and that's really the way this unfolded for me.
Yeah, I love that you incorporated the kind of physical activity with it. I think, you're not, there's been great, I think Mishima said something about this way back when, where he said, I find that if I run every day, I can write for longer periods of time. Like
Absolutely.
if I can keep the body and mind, this kind of, even if it's just a moment of just relaxation, because you can kind of clear your head a minute while you're running, you're not thinking about anything else, and then the answer just pops in, or like once the head is cleared, and they go hand in hand. And I think, yeah, more writers should think of it as that too, because it's almost exercise for the brain as well as for the body, and that sign of kind
No
of,
question.
yeah.
I'm a better person and more productive judge and writer because I exercise.
Right, stress relief even. Yeah, you got a stressful job, high stakes. Yeah,
Yeah.
you got to have something. And this is another question we asked. We don't need any numbers. And we kind of know this already. How do you make a living? Obviously, you're a judge and a lawyer, but I'd like to ask, do you make any money off the literature? 'Cause we asked this question, one, to dispel the myth that all these writers are millionaires, but also, it's tough out there for writers. So we like to
Yeah.
know, yeah, how's that gone? Have you made any money off the
So,
literature?
so the book is actually it comes out in I guess about a week.
Next
So
week,
the
yeah.
July 15th. So that remains to be seen. I'm not
Okay.
expecting to make a lot of money. I
Right,
didn't do
right.
this to make a lot of money. I did it because it was a joy to do. It was a labor of love. If I end up selling some books, that's wonderful. But I don't expect to retire from judging because of starting a potential sequel.
Yeah. I was said some of the stuff that I've seen from reports, I mean, even Stephen King's book sales are down. Like
Yeah,
he's not making
it's
as
it's
much
a
as he used
tough
to. Yeah.
tough nut for
Yeah.
sure.
It's rough out there. Yeah. So we like to ask that stuff. We also like to ask, what advice would you give to writers out there just starting out, maybe trying to build something on their own, or maybe just follow kind of a whim like you have, or kind of just like, I've started to write this story and then see where it goes. Yeah, what advice would you give, if any?
So I think
Yeah.
the most important is just get started. Right, getting
Right.
started is usually the hardest aspect of any writing project. Um, and that it's daunting. It was daunting for me, but once you have a foundation, you can build on that, and you just have to be disciplined and push yourself to get the thing across the finish line. And again, I believe it's as simple as 500, 1,000 words a day. Just do
Right.
something to move that story along, and then when you have a finished manuscript, you just have to be patient and think about how am I going to get this out to the world. And I'm obviously a big proponent of indie publishers. I was fortunate with Brandy Lane, and there are plenty of outlets out there that are interested in promising young writers who are talented. And if you're not wedded to the notion that you need to make a lot of money selling books, odds are if you stick with it, you're going to find an outlet and you're going to achieve your goal.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that advice too. Is I think so many too there's this mistaken idea that you have to kind of sacrifice everything for your art or something. Where it's like, well, no, you can have a busy day job and you can have a life and a family and you can still kind of squeeze it in. And actually nowadays you kind of have to
You
because you're
kind of
not
have to,
gonna,
and you're
yeah.
probably better off, right?
Right. Yeah,
You're probably going to
exactly.
be
Yeah.
happier if you
Yeah.
have other things to do.
And one of the last questions we like to ask as well is, we like to ask what you're reading, watching, listening to. We ask this question because I feel like we're always curious about where creative stuff comes from, how you come up with ideas. And I have this thing where whatever you're filling your head with is what's bouncing around in there. So we like to ask, yeah, watching anything good, reading anything good, listening to anything good. And this can be anything. This can be, reality TV, or this could be, literary, high-minded, Dostoevsky or something, whatever you're bouncing around in your head right now. What's
Yeah.
bouncing around?
So, in terms of reading, this summer. I just finished a book. I'm blanking on the title, about the British consul to Charleston, South Carolina, in the lead up and during the Civil War. He was kind of playing both sides effectively, and led a fascinating life. So that's my most recent book. In terms of what I'm watching, so I love. I'm not a reality TV guy, but I'm a movie buff. I love movies.
Okay, yeah.
And so I'm also a big fan of certain television shows. Better Call Saul is probably my favorite of all
Oh,
time.
yes.
Mad Men. Big fan of The Wire, The
Mhm.
Sopranos. I probably watched all of those two or three times. So I'm constantly on Netflix and Amazon Prime and the like. When I'm not, in terms of fiction, I'll read anything. I love Alan First. He's one of my favorite novelists. Nelson DeMille, Michael Connelly is one of my favorites and go to. I've read almost all of his books. I love nonfiction and biography. So I've read widely about Winston Churchill. William Manchester's trilogy is probably my favorite. There's another book I just read before I read the book about the consul to Charleston, about Winston Churchill and his son, which is fascinating. So
Yeah.
Randolph Churchill having this famous father that he can never quite live up to, but was brilliant in his own right, and struggling through that dynamic. That was fascinating to me. I often say my greatest fear, worst nightmare, would be to be stuck in a room without something to read. I'll
Yeah,
read in
right. Yeah.
front of me.
Yeah, that's fantastic too. Yeah, the Churchill stuff. I remember that book came out relatively recently, right? About his son.
Yeah,
That's I remember seeing.
yeah.
I think that it might have been on Joe Rogan or something when they were promoting it or something.
Great
Yeah,
book.
yeah. With that's a theme on this podcast too. I guess it's kind of a theme in the world, right? You're living in your father's shadow, and again, gets into the masculinity. How do you handle that? You have this very successful father that you love and respect, but then you're always kind of in this little overshadowed thing. How do you top that or build your own self away from that? The last name is always going to be in people's heads as your father's. Like, I don't know. Yeah, that's an interesting thing too. Yeah, very interesting topic, rich topic for fiction and nonfiction here, as we said. And the final question here, Thomas, we like to ask writers: what are you working on now? What's taking up your creative energy?
That's
Some
a great
authors we've
question.
had are
So
a little
yeah, so I
superstitious; they don't want to
spent
share. But yeah, whatever.
Yeah, so we finishing touches on Charlie Man the manuscript, the publishing editing process um, was completed. I want to say I put the final edits, improved those in April. So I really haven't done anything creative since then. I've just kind of been anticipating the publication of the novel. Want to see how it's received, and we'll see about another project in the near future, whether it's a sequel, more Charlie Mann, or something entirely different. I think I'll do something, and I look forward to have another opportunity, another crack at it.
Yeah, that'll be great. That'll be great. Well, Thomas, this has been fantastic. Where can people find you? Website, social media handles, and this will all be linked below as well, but where can people
Sure.
find your stuff?
So federal judges don't do social media.
Yeah.
Don't have much of a profile for many reasons. We don't do that. But I have a publicist, PR by the Book. They have a page. My publisher, Brandy Lane, has a page. You can Google my name and judge, and you'll find things that I've written, op-eds and essays and the like. I'm not hard to find. So there's enough out there if you're interested in me.
Well, there you have it. Yeah, fantastic. Thomas, please come back anytime, next book or anything. Please come back whenever. We'd love to have you back.
Well, thanks a lot, Andrew. This has been a lot of fun.
Fantastic.
Heavy.
Bored.
Heavy.
I am heavy, heavy, heavy.
Bored.
I may say the smell is entirely hostile.
shows such a lack of gratitude for life. Bored. I aspire to boredom, I should say.
Bored. Heavy.
I am heavy.
Bored.
Has you the night sweats and the day sweats, pal? Pal, I do.
If you're hearing this, it's because you are listening to the free public feed of Heavy Board. To get complete, uncensored, uninterrupted, full access to this podcast, become a subscriber at patreon.com/heavyboard. That's right, Heavy Board is made possible by subscribers like you. For less than 1 cup of coffee per month, you will receive private access to uncensored, full-length episodes, Jerk Shop, heavy bonus content, subscribers-only AMA episodes, bonus extended interviews, and more. Come join the conversation today at patreon.com/heavyboard.